All right, Scott, let's talk about our running back strategy going into this offseason. I know we've talked about this a couple times. You said you've been doing some research lately with how like these running backs' value should be affected by the prospects coming in. And we talked a little bit about it right before we recorded and sounded really interesting. But do you want to just kind of jump in with your running back strategy with all these rookies coming in and talk about some of the research you've been doing?
Yeah, so I approached you with this idea for a video because it's kind of a thing that I've changed my tune on over the last couple weeks with a lot of the running backs going back to school. So you had 5 major potential declarations go back to school, obviously with Najee Harris, Travis Etienne, Chuba Hubbard, Kylan Hill, and Trey Sermon. Probably 5 of the top 12 to 15 running backs for most people. And so it's kind of thrown a wrench into my strategy where in, super flex leagues, especially leagues where there's point per carry or, a flex league where you only have to start one receiver, kind of like our fleet league, it pushed up the idea of, man, I'm going to be able to get a good running back like at the very end of the first round. If you just go 7 or 8 deep, I'm looking at the RB7 or the RB8. And I'm going to be able to get them, once you factor in that there's going to be a couple receivers that inevitably get drafted in every draft regardless. And then there's going to be, at least I think 3 quarterbacks now, if not more, that go in the first round too. So, I'm looking at leagues where I was one of the playoff teams or the champion or picked up some extra picks. And I'm sitting here like late first, early second. I'm saying that's going to be a really, really great range to add to your running backs and really get an advantage. If you hit on one of the running backs that is the running back 7 or running back 8, you may end up getting, this year's version of like Kerryon Johnson or, someone that hits where no one really had them on their radar, like Devin Singletary potentially. But my tune has changed a little bit. And so it's changed in twofold. Obviously, one with those guys going back to school. It's really pushed up, I think, some average running back prospects that, we're probably destined to be at least second round rookie picks, if not later. The people are now starting to move up just by default because, everyone in Dynasty chases running backs.
Yep.
And so, obviously draft capital is going to matter. And there's going to be a couple guys that we're not really talking about right now that get bumped up because they do get drafted higher than, we expect. But I also think that we're going to be victims of some guys that get drafted in the 4th and 5th round. And maybe they were considered to be good talents, but, they were good talents in context of a really deep draft. But now they're going to get pushed up on people's boards, especially if they land in landing spots where there's already a volatile starter that's there. Now, specifically, the research that I'm doing is, just to be very clear, I've gone back and looked at the last 10 years of running backs that have been drafted in the NFL. So I've excluded undrafted free agents because the data set, it's too hard to make conclusions out of all the undrafted free agent running backs. It's really hard to pick out the outliers and separate them from the many, many others that have never made it.
From all the practice squad guys.
Right. So I just looked at players that are drafted. And then I took the age they were on draft day, which, obviously we know the draft is like 4 months before the season starts. So, essentially if you're looking for their age on the opening day, it would be like 4 months after, what they were on draft day. And then I look at their draft capital and combine that with what they did during their rookie contracts. And people have asked me, well, why did you pick the rookie contracts? Well, because when you're speaking about running backs in Dynasty, I don't really consider many running backs past their rookie contracts, which for a first rounder would be 5 years. And for a second rounder later would be 4 years. After that, you get some numbers where you would be shocked at how many guys that got drafted that their careers literally ended after 3 or 4 years. I'm looking up their stats and then their stats are just done after they hit their rookie contract. So I didn't track, how many got second contracts, how many were relevant afterwards. But the outliers would really screw the numbers. If you count guys like Le'Veon Bell or Mark Ingram or Lamar Miller, they're clearly outliers regardless of where they were drafted. And to me, Lamar Miller was a 5th round pick that hit. But clearly, when he's productive and still starting in his 7th season, he's an outlier. He's not really treated as like a 5th round pick at that point.
Yeah,
he's clearly past that. So I just felt that using data throughout their entire career kind of threw off the point that why I did this study in the first place. And especially in Dynasty, we really only play running backs for their rookie contracts. We're not really looking to buy a ton of guys or bank on a ton of guys lasting, into year 6, year 7, year 8. So I think for application of this, it makes sense to cut it off at this point. So let's talk a little bit about strategies now that we know some of these things. And I'll dive a little bit more into the data as we go on with the discussion. And I'm going to do a full podcast on this because I could literally talk about it for like an hour. Some of the names, some of the surprises. But just for purposes of this, I want to get your thoughts on, we have a class that's now depleted. And we have a class, we don't necessarily know who the names are. We don't know the landing spots. We don't know the draft capital. But there's going to be a couple guys that maybe get taken like late day 2. And, they go to a decent landing spot or both. And so people automatically are going to push them up their boards. And you're going to have people that are starved for running backs. And it's been pounded in people's heads, don't trade for running backs. I've been leading the charge. I've been somebody that says anytime someone approaches me with a trade for a running back, it's basically, no, there's no reason to do it now. There's no reason to trade for a veteran in January. The only thing that can happen to them in the next 4 months or so is negative, until we get past the draft, past free agency, and then you can clearly say, well, hey, Detroit really didn't do much in their backfield. It looks like Kerryon Johnson's going to get one more shot to be, a 20-touch-a-game running back. There's no reason to pay sticker price for that today when he's in a group of one of maybe 10 to 15 guys. And, we figured coming into the draft that there's going to be at least half those guys that are going to be impacted in terms of their fantasy value. So I don't know if you have any additional thoughts, but that's where I've been coming from for the last 6 months. That's why I planned on or told everybody trade for as many 2020 picks as you can. Even sell your running backs during the season as contenders and try to get away with winning without needing them on your roster because you're not going to want to have them right now because you can't trade them for anything. So have you seen that in some of your leagues where everyone's trying to kind of trade the same guys? Like everyone's trying to get rid of those like risky running back 2s, the Chris Carsons, the James Connors. Like, have you seen those guys seem like they're hitting? No, all those guys are hitting like the
in
trade
multiple
blocks?
Leagues.
Yes.
Like I'm thinking one specifically. This every day we get a message. Who wants Chris Carson? And then everyone says nobody wants Chris Carson because why would we buy him? And then he goes, oh, okay, I'll keep the top 5 NFL rusher. Like on my, you know what I mean? Because the same thing, you listen to every podcast, everyone's saying, oh, sell high on Derrick Henry, sell high on Aaron Jones. You can't sell high because nobody's buying. You know what I mean?
Well, those are 2 great examples because I think those are 2 guys that are still insulated enough in their value. I'm not worried about Derrick Henry or Aaron Jones going forward, but I would still buy them, but only at like the top 15 running back price.
Yeah.
Because of what they did, everyone's wanting, I've been offered Derrick Henry for Joe Mixon plus. They want me to give up Mixon plus.
Yeah.
Aaron Jones. Everyone's trying to sell those guys at a premium when really their value should just be, fringe RB1. I'd be willing to buy for a mid to late first on those guys, but clearly nobody's really selling for that price. So
yeah. See, that's what those polarizing guys. That's why I don't see any running backs like getting moved in any of my leagues really right now, just because nobody wants to buy and everyone's trying to sell at a price that they think that they're worth, which maybe they are with their 2019 production. But like I said, nobody's willing to buy them.
Well, you remember me saying this, that just naturally, I actually think some of these guys could be worth mid to late first round picks.
Yeah.
It's just not right now.
Yeah.
And so there's this temporary dip in their market value where everyone wants to sell them. Nobody wants to buy them. So what does that do? Just basic economics. The price is lower than what the market says because there's nobody that's buying. So I'm taking this away and saying, okay, I'm looking at this data and trying to figure out who are some guys that I can take some historical data and base that off of if I'm going to make a move now, which I'm going to try to avoid as much as possible. But, there could be a deal that comes into your inbox that the value is decent enough that you have to consider doing it now because it may not be on the table. I do think most deals you can probably wait a couple months, but I'll give you an example. In a point per carry league the other day, I got offered Melvin Gordon for Terry McLaurin straight up.
Okay.
Now, I bet you if you put that poll on Twitter, it would probably be very close, but I wouldn't be shocked if Terry McLaurin won just because he's a rookie receiver, and all the rookie receivers are hot right now. He's a guy everyone wants to buy, and no one really wants to buy Melvin Gordon. And I'm not a Melvin Gordon fan, but
you're a point per carry fan.
I'm a point per carry fan, but
yeah.
I'm also, and I don't have everything in front of me regarding receivers, but I'm also, a side note, I'm a little skeptical about Terry McLaurin too, because he's being valued at, right now he's wide receiver 28, but you look at a little bit more deeper into his rookie year. Terry McLaurin is going to be 25 years old.
Oh, really?
This September. Yep.
I had no idea.
Yeah, he played most of his rookie season at 24 years old, and arguably he didn't really have much competition for targets last year. Now, he was up and down. He obviously did a lot with the opportunity that he had, but I kind of look at it and say, did he dominate in his first year because, he's at such an advanced age, and he's going to be 25.
How have I never heard that? Nobody really like everyone. Calvin Ridley coming out. Everyone talked about his age and everything, but never heard that about McLaurin.
Yeah, I mean, there were people that talked about it, but I just think it goes under the radar because once they get to the NFL, we look at it as, well, they're all rookies, they're all young. But if you really put it under a microscope, you see some of these guys like, A.J. Brown doing what he did at 22, or DJ Moore did what he did at 21. Like, that's why those guys spiked so high in value. It's because they're already producing at an insane level. Even Chris Godwin did what he did at 23.
Yeah.
And, Terry McLaurin's going to be 25. So regardless, can his value go up from wide receiver 28? Yes. But I think he's probably capped at, maybe a mid-tier wide receiver 2. I don't see him having an elite ceiling where it's like the team's going to feed him 150 plus targets. So I thought that was the kind of deal where normally I wouldn't trade for Melvin Gordon, but I think Melvin Gordon, I know I've seen people post about Melvin Gordon's consistency, and yes, he's battled with some injuries and whatever, but I think he's a pretty fair bet to give you maybe another 1 to 2 seasons of smash production, depending on where he lands. So that was one of the few deals where I'm thinking, okay, I'm getting a good price now, and I'm willing to pull the trigger. So it was point per carry, obviously, but I traded a guy that I felt was maybe capped out at value, or had a limited ceiling in terms of value in Terry McLaurin. So that was a deal I'm willing to make that type of deal now. So I don't know if you can think of any other examples, but most trades like that, I'm waiting until I have more information in front of me. I'm waiting to see all the combine testing, and I'm trying to wait till I see draft capital for all the other running backs, and more importantly, what veterans get impacted by the draft before I make any moves. So that kind of sets the stages on what I'm thinking here.
Okay, so quick question that kind of goes along with this. What do you think about Kareem Hunt with the recent report of him being like not arrested but found with drugs? And he's another guy that it was kind of a reason I wasn't going out and buying any of these veteran running backs, because he was such an appealing free agent. Are you lowering his value at all, or what's going on there?
So Kareem Hunt, I mean, if you just look at his profile, Kareem Hunt played his entire rookie year, just turning 22 years old, and he actually hit running back 1 threshold his first 2 years. So his profile is elite. Mm-hmm. And the only thing that's putting a wrench in Kareem Hunt is obviously the off the field stuff, which I don't even think his off the field stuff is really a thing. I think it's more just speaks to the pattern of, hey, here's a guy that had potential, absolute smash spot for the first 4 years, and he threw that away with a bad choice that he made. And obviously that was on video, so it just enhanced it. But he was getting a second chance. He stayed out of trouble for a year in Cleveland, actually posted decent numbers last year as essentially just a satellite running back with the Browns. And now he's looking at potentially getting to free agency. I mean, he literally was 2 months away from what could be a huge opportunity to reboot his career. Yeah. And then he's going to be, a completely unrestricted free agent after next year. So even if he goes somewhere else and signs is on a 1-year deal with another team, he's either going to get paid as a restricted free agent this year, or he's going to hit free agency after next year. And assumably, if he changed teams, he wouldn't be sought after by somebody that's going to make him a 7-8 touch a game running back. So he was this close to getting his chance back to actually earning, a second contract as a running back. So I guess I would say I would still bet on his profile over some of his volatility. But there's a chance, what if he stays in Cleveland? What are you doing with him if he stays in Cleveland? Will you still buy knowing that he's probably capped at 15 touches a week? I mean, what are your thoughts there? Because I'll bank on the talent. I'll still treat him as like a late first round value if someone's willing to sell him to me. Especially because I know, let's say he does go somewhere else and he does land in a smash spot and someone seeks him out, his value is going to go up between now and when he does that. So there's a chance to maybe sell him for more. So that is also an appeal to potentially buy him. So what are your thoughts?
See, if he stays in Cleveland, honestly, I'm probably going to be looking to sell low because I know his value will drop right away just with the recent news because everyone's excited at the thought of him going elsewhere. But it kind of seems to me like a Tevin Coleman situation if he stays in Cleveland where we're excited for his future, but at this current situation isn't much. And I'm kind of fine waiting it out with like a Dallas Goedert at this point. I know the past 2 years I was saying to sell Dallas Goedert, but I think it's kind of a similar situation we can look at. But now with Kareem Hunt, the thing is he's a running back. So because of that, I would be less interested in buying the talent and I'd be more interested in buying the situation. So if he does end up back in Cleveland, I'm probably looking to sell even though it's going to lower his value. But I was just talking more in the context of him being a threat to other veteran running back jobs. And I just didn't know how big of a deal this latest, I don't even know if you can call it arrest. What exactly was it? I just saw the video of him getting pulled over and him saying he wouldn't pass a drug test right now.
Yeah, so he got pulled over and they found traces of marijuana in his car. Mm-hmm. He wasn't cited for that though. So technically, I mean, it isn't a crime. He didn't get arrested.
So it's a non-story.
It's a non-citation. The only issue is he admitted on camera that he wouldn't pass a drug test. So the fear now turns from this is a personal conduct thing, which I guess this could fall under the personal conduct policy, but I think more it turns into, would you be shocked after this that he ends up getting 3 random drug tests before free agency? I mean, something like that.
No, but at the same time, I think the drugs, like I've learned a lot about it in class. The drug testing system's so flawed that I'm not even honestly really worried about it. I'm pretty sure 90% of the NFL players smoke.
That would be the worry, this turns into a drug suspension. And I also think that there's a little bit of politics going on here where, you're right. Could the NFL bust half the players during the offseason for weed if they wanted?
Yeah.
I mean, given that there's other states where there's NFL teams where this would literally be a non-story, where he would be allowed to have it in his system, it's legal in other states. It seems to me that the NFL should maybe take the high road and not look to seek players out for.
I kind of think I don't really have much evidence with this lately, but I think they have kind of been taking the high road in the past year or two.
And I don't think we'd ever know it if they were, but it does seem like there have been a lot less. This guy was busted for smoking weed type, penalties and positive tests than there were in the past. So, I mean, I think you're right though. The window for these guys is really short. This is going to be Kareem Hunt's 4th year. So, how long do you wait? Do you hold out one more year with him on the Browns, just touching the ball, 180 times during the season, where that clearly is going to limit his upside to basically just being like a fringe running back too. He might be a guy you can play in your lineup as a flex, but that's it. You have to wait another season for his potential ceiling to land in a different spot. And I agree with you. If I can sell him even on the Browns, if there's somebody that's saying, I think he could be a guy that starts for me every week as like a running back too. If I can get a late first rounder and take a shot at like one of the top 4 or 5 receivers in this draft, I think I'd be willing to do that if he ends up staying with Cleveland. So that's a good question.
Just a small side note, I think he would be like, even if he does stay in Cleveland, he would be a really great guy to have. Like, I know you play in a lot of FFPC leagues that are big tournament leagues and you're just shooting for upside. I mean, his upside, if anything happened to Chubb, would be through the roof. But in just a standard like 12-team Dynasty league, I think maybe you can get a better price than what his upside offers.
Well, I think you made a great comp in Tevin Coleman. Tevin Coleman essentially came in. He got hurt his first season, but Tevin Coleman posted RB2 numbers year 2, year 3, and year 4. And all of those years, at least the last 2 years, he was priced in redraft as like 5th round pick.
Yeah, he was going 5th round every year.
But it was always with another running back in front of him. And it was always like, well, I'm buying a running back 2 that I can flex, but if there's an injury, it potentially could be a top 5 guy just based on the offense. And I think you could say the same thing about the Browns with Stefanski there, that if something happened to Chubb, Hunt does have upside, but in Dynasty, do you really want to pay a first round price for that? I think I'd be the kind of person that if I want exposure to Kareem Hunt, I would either be buying for lower, I'd throw out like a mid-second to see if there's an owner that's willing to sell him to me, or I would just take him a bunch in redraft at that price and try to hit on in there. That way I'd get my exposure instead of buying him, in Dynasty for first round picks. Especially the more I hear about this rookie receiver class, I don't love taking receivers like in the late first in Superflex leagues. I'd much rather take a quarterback, like a first round draft capital quarterback. But man, the allure of how many hits have been at the wide receiver in the last 2 years, the allure of getting like Jalen Reagor, like 111 type picks, that could be appealing depending on the league, depending on the starting lineup format.